So the other day I came across kind of an interesting sampling technique that I haven't used before, and I really want to share it with you guys because it's pretty easy to set up, and I've been using it in a wide variety of contexts in music production. So let's take a look at how it works. I like to call this the noise gate sampling technique, and the way that it works is you start with just a basic loop or any song that you want to sample, really. So this one sounds like this. Sometimes what I do when I'm sampling these loops off Splice or whatever is I'll layer some loops together to create more of an interesting foundation to start with. So I stacked this like vocal loop on top of it. I thought it sounded pretty cool. And on the second half of that, I lowered it down by an octave just for a different flavor to work with. So it all revolves around the noise gate. And if you just type in gate in Ableton, you can use the stock one really easily. But the thing that you do need to make sure is that it has a sidechain input available. And if you need a little bit of a reminder, whenever the audio input goes above the threshold, the gate opens and allows the sound to go through. And then whenever it goes below the threshold that you select, it either reduces the volume or mutes it in some cases. Probably the most famous example is the gated reverb sound on a snare from a lot of 80s tracks. So instead of using the input of the track that the gate is actually on, which is actually on the loop that we've got going here, we're going to activate the sidechain input button here on the top left. And then what we're gonna do is I made a new MIDI track called Trigger, and I'm just gonna open up any old synth. It really honestly doesn't matter too much. And the only thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to the amp 1 section, which is where you control the envelope for the amplitude. And I'm just gonna set the sustain at 100 because whenever I press a button, I want it to go all the way up in volume. And then we're gonna take the release down to something real short here. And if I just play a note, that's what the input is going to sound like. Now, what I like to do is set the output on our trigger track to be sends only. There's other ways that you can accomplish this, but essentially we're just muting the output to the mix bus because we don't want to hear every time we press a note. It's like dung, 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 dung. We're just going to use that as the trigger for our sidechain input. So if we go back to our loop here and we set the audio input to be trigger, you can see that when we press a button on our synth here, the gate starts responding to it, and that's what we want. So I'm going to take the floor all the way down to negative infinity because I want it to basically mute whenever the gate closes. So let's play the loop here. And you can't hear anything until I press a note here. So essentially, whenever we press a note, it's almost like it starts playing where the playhead is in the loop, and then it'll stop. And you can get these cool sort of glitchy sounds as the playhead is going across, and you're activating it with certain patterns. So now what I'm gonna do is just get a basic drum loop going. Let's go with... And all we're gonna do is use that to inspire how we want to have the gate operate with our loop here. And this does not have to be perfect by any means, because we can always go back through and quantize it. You can see that I pressed even some notes I didn't even want to press, so let's get rid of those. And then what I'm going to do is just quantize it a little bit. So I just press Command A, and then I'm going to press Command Shift U and select the percentage that we want to quantize. Let's say, I don't know, 50%. And depending how kind of choppy you want it to sound, just go to your gate settings and you can adjust the attack, hold, and release, which is essentially, how quickly the gate closes, how long it opens when it stays open, and then how long it takes to close back up again. So if you want it to sound a little bit smoother, just make sure you lengthen some of those controls and adjust to taste. Now this is a fine starting point, but we can actually make it sound a little bit better. And one way that we can do that is to throw on like an effects processing unit basically on top of our loop. I like to use Effectrix for this, so something that kind of rearranges the sample in new and interesting ways. So it's not just repeating the same thing over and over again. And you can really really get some interesting results when you start messing with all this stuff. So let's add effect tricks, for example, onto our loop, and we'll add it before the gate because we want the gate to be opening and closing after all the effects are applied. So I say we just go through and click this chaos button and until we find something kind of cool that we can work with. I kind of like the way that this one sounds, so check this out. I'm gonna take the gate off. And then when we add the gate back in, it starts applying all those effects on and off. It's really fun to do. And one other thing I like to do when you got your chops ready is I like to add kind of a delay effect or maybe even some reverb in some cases. So I have a send here that's going to a ping pong delay, and I'm just sending a little bit of it, and you can start to hear that it makes the stereo image a lot more interesting and fills in some of the space that the chops aren't in. One thing I've been experimenting with too is adding more and more layers into the loop group that we've got going here. So yes, you could add bass on top of this, but what if you add the bass inside of the group that's getting chopped up by the gate? And then that way everything sounds more cohesive, but you still get a wider range of the frequency spectrum to work with. So if we drag in just a normal bass, you know, something basic like that, I think. So here's what it'll sound like with none of the effects on. Okay, and then once we add the effect tricks and the gate. You could even add some like synth chords to help reinforce what's already there in the loop to make it even thicker. Right, and then everything together, it sounds like this. So yeah, you know, give this technique a shot and let me know how you get on with it. I think it's also pretty useful for like layering on top of other sample chops that you've already got just to add some additional textures, as well as, you know, being a pretty useful starting point. If you have any questions about how this is set up, or you have any ideas that you want to share with other producers out there, please do so down below. And as always, happy music making, and we will see you guys in the next video. Peace.